Hello, you lovely humans. Welcome to the Live Outrageously with Lady Grey podcast. I am your hostess, Lady Grey, and we're here to talk about living outside the box, breaking down barriers, thinking differently, and making a bigger impact on the world. Find us on Clubhouse every Thursday for coffee talk and every Sunday for Girl Talk with Lady Grey. I would really love to connect with you and get to know you better, so I hope that you'll join us. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here with me today. I have a great show for you today. We're here with Spud Marshall to talk about designing creative communities. Later on in the program, we'll take a fun break with Spud for a little game. Towards the end of our show, we'll be talking about ways that you can train your brain to be more creative and how important community and connection can be for your creativity. All of you know that I love to build community. I love the League of Outrageous Women. I love Lady Grey's Lovelies and our audiences. And so I really always preach how important community is as a pillar and a principle of living an outrageous life. So today I invited Spud Marshall, who is a serial social entrepreneur, a creative community builder, and someone who is listed as one of the top millennial civic leaders in our country. He has just published a book called Designing Creative Communities. And so we're here to talk a little bit about how you can make an outrageous contribution to places where you live, work, learn, and play. Welcome, Spud. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah, super excited to be here.
Yeah, so I am pretty thrilled about your new book, Designing Creative Communities. I've been writing and underlining and highlighting and all the things. So I am hoping that we can kind of talk a little bit about what it means to be a community builder and really create some change, whether that's in a local community, in individual people's lives, or on a grander scale, and what it kind of means to dig into creating transformational spaces and containers for people so that they can grow and evolve.
Yeah, I love talking about that. Excited to jam with that.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for putting this out into the universe for purely selfish reasons. I love that you wrote this book. And I thought maybe we could start with the framework that the book is written around, this canvas framework that you've kind of outlined.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And it's fun to be able to talk about the book and not simply be sitting alone in my basement with my dog beside me, staring at a blank wall as I write it. So this is the more fun part of the process.
Wait a second.
Yes.
I know that wall was not blank because I saw the Post-it notes.
Good point. It started blank. And okay. Yeah, I'm not somebody that, uses highlighters and pens. I very much just use sticky notes. And so, yeah, by the end of the writing process, my wall was littered in sticky notes, trying to map out and make sense of how to frame the book, which actually is where this sort of canvas framework emerged from. As I started looking back at a lot of the work that I've done over the past decade or so, and really like pulling from the rich stories of a bunch of the community builders that I've had a chance to work alongside over the years. I was trying to distill this down into some framework that made sense for others who want to equally create change in their community. They want to create spaces that are really vibrant and thriving, where people can show up as their full selves. And so I wanted to make sense of like, what's the steps that people go through to create those types of communities. And one of the kind of the metaphors that really started to come to mind for me was around how we view the spaces where we live, work, learn, and play. And so often, we see them as kind of this like engine, this thing that we have to fix, and this piece is broken, and then we got to come here and tweak this piece. And perhaps that was informed by my mechanical engineering training. That right. was sort of where I grew out of, right? So I was always taught to like think of the world around me as a problem to fix. And there was this really, I think, freeing replacement metaphor of like, rather than seeing your community as a problem to be fixed, as an engine to work on, see it as this really blank canvas that you can create on, that you can make your mark, that you can contribute to, and view your communities as places that are really this kind of creative canvas. And that sort of opened up the framework for the book, of how do you design creative communities from this canvas lens. And so the framework walks people through 6 different steps uh, around the Canvas language. And so step 1 is C, which is chart your path, getting clarity on where you're going and how you're going to get there. Step 2 is A, which is ask probing questions. And so really like getting at the heart of what's the need or the core assumptions that you're trying to test for around the community that you want to build. And then step 3 is N, which is name early adopters. And so how do you find those first people, the first followers that are going to get behind you and really rally behind an idea? And that leads into then step 4, which is visualize a prototype. And so I feel like oftentimes when we're trying to create communities, it's not enough to just talk about it. You've got to actually tangibly create things that you can learn from. And so these are small little prototypes that test the assumptions that you've been working towards. And then that ends up feeding into step 5, which is A, articulate your story. And so what's the narrative that's really forming around this community that you're trying to create and build? And then lastly, step 6, which is S, which is sustain your efforts with partners. So how do you actually bring other organizations and entities to help sustain and kind of enrich the work that you've kind of brought to fruition by that point? So the Canvas framework sort of guides people through whether you're trying to do something really small, right? Like a tiny little initiative with your neighbors, or something much more systemic and large scale. Hopefully the Canvas framework is a helpful tool to guide people through that process.
I absolutely love it. It's so rich, Spud. I really, there's so much here. And as somebody who is coaching individuals, the idea of the blank canvas and not just the problems to fix is so, it just rings so true. Because I think we spend a lot of time being told, hey, you need to do better. You need to be more fill in the blank. You need to
Mm.
fix this, whatever came, before problems that you've maybe had in the past. And so I really spend a lot of time when I'm coaching women, working on possibility and seeing vision for their life and not simply focusing on the past. You said something in the first section when you were talking about charting your path that I wanted to read real quick because I absolutely love the way that this addresses vision. You said, beyond honesty, which is a trait that is important for leaders and followers alike, the ability to create a compelling vision that you can backcast from is the single most important trait that will position you as a leader. As you consider what your vision looks like for your community, give yourself permission to ignore the constraints of your current reality and dream about a future that hasn't been created yet. To me, obviously as a coach, I am trying hard to get individuals to see their own lives this way. But can you speak a little bit about what that might look like for communities?
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of focused in on that part, because I think it's really been resonant for me as part of the, early part of this process of how do you create change, both on an individual level, but then also on a community and a systemic level, is really having clarity of where you're going. And oftentimes, and you pulled out the word backcasting in that quote that you shared out of the book.
Mhm.
So oftentimes we view the world around us from a forecasting lens, which, right, if you think of a weatherman, right, that's sort of like the classic way that we think about predicting the weather. It's like, okay, these things have happened in the past. And so we can predict forward that we think we're going to forecast that this is going to happen tomorrow. This is what the weather will look like. And that's helpful when predicting weather, but it's actually not very helpful when you're trying to create new emergent systems for a community to step into. And so the flip side of forecasting is something called backcasting. And backcasting is, rather than start with the end in mind, you actually start with the future in mind. So you remove the constraints, you remove the limitations that may be present in kind of current patterns or current dynamics in your community. And you start from a place of like possibility and creativity and levity of like what would be possible if we could create our dream scenario, our dream community, our dream organization, our dream version of our own self. And then once you have that like crystal clear vision of what the end looks like, then you backcast to where you are today. And then you ask yourself the question, what do I need to remove, to add, to tweak from my current reality in order to get to that, future envisioned reality that you've kind of dreamt up? And so that idea of backcasting has been really important for me. One of the stories that I think really shines light on this was I had the privilege to help run a group, and I'm still involved with them, called Three Dots, which is this arts and innovation center here in State College. And one of our early directors, when we were in the process of hiring the executive director, I asked her the question, what does success look like for you? Right. So it's kind of like teeing her up to get into this backcasting headspace.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, what does success look like? And her response really like hit me. And she shared, I want to feel sad when I leave this town and I leave this position someday. And so she shared a little bit more about that. She's like, if I were to leave this community at this point, I would actually feel pretty excited, right? Like I haven't found my people, I haven't found my group. And so I'd be more than happy to move on. It would be kind of this freeing experience. But then she spun it and she's like, but if I could get this job and I could create the space that so is needed in my world and with my, people that I want to nurture, I would feel really sad if I had to leave that. Right. And so she kind of put herself in this headspace of like, this is the world that I would really feel sad having to leave if I was able to create that. And so that really resonated with us in terms of like what we wanted to build on a community level, but then it also really spoke to her on an individual level. And so, imagining a town you would feel sad having to leave someday, I think is a really powerful frame as we think about the roles that we play as kind of emergent leaders in these spaces.
So how do you think that applies when you're talking about things on a bigger scale, right? Like I love that concept of being sad. For people that are organizing, let's say, a global event or group, or they're doing something on a more regional or national level where it's not necessarily changing a small town or creating a neighborhood or building a tribe in person. How do you think that concept applies? Or does it?
Yeah, I think it applies in a lot of ways. I think we are so conditioned to think with the constraints in mind as our starting point that it actually feels fairly radical when we like put those to the side. One of the frameworks that I talk about a little bit later in the book is something called divergent versus convergent thinking.
Yeah, it's on my list of things to talk about. I love it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that ties into this question a lot is, we are so often in society expected to think really expansively and creatively and simultaneously like distill which of those ideas are the most, solid or the most legitimate or the most likely to, actually take place.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to both analyze solutions and come up with creative new solutions simultaneously. And that's really, really difficult, to be able to hold both of those spaces together. And so I think so often when we're thinking about how do you create this kind of compelling future vision for a group, whether it's small scale or big scale, as you're talking about, we have to kind of separate ourselves from the analysis mindset, right? So we have to kind of put that on pause. And it's not to say that that's not a helpful mindset. It's just not appropriate at this point, right? You can't do both at the same time. So it's like put the analysis perspective on hold temporarily and just step into that really generative, creative kind of divergent thinking. So it's a really expansive type. And so that I feel is really helpful and really useful to any context, whether it's a big, we want to create some regional change, across multiple states, or again, smaller, more relational within a neighborhood. I think it's helpful either way.
Yeah, I find that in my own personal idea generation,
Mm.
that I have been discouraged pretty repeatedly from brainstorming at a really magnificent level because it's unrealistic, quote unquote. And
Mm.
so what ends up happening is, as like you said, there's that simultaneous check and balance thing happening. And you're going, oh, well, that there are no resources for that, or that's a 10-year project, or I don't have the community that I need to be able to build something like that, or I don't know how to do that. So why would I even dream of doing it? Right. And so you constantly are checking yourself against what your current reality is, like you said. And that, I think, really keeps you from potentially changing the world, right? And stumbling upon a genius idea or moment of brilliance because you're not allowing it to just flow out first and then take a hard look at it after.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we beat ourselves up because some of us are not the really creative, expansive, type of thinkers, and that's not a problem. But sometimes we expect that we should be able to think like that, or vice versa. And I put myself in this camp is
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very expansive, creative thinker. But when it comes to like tactics and operations and all of that, that's not necessarily my strong suit. And so sometimes I feel like I have like an insufficiency there when I'm contributing to a team. And so I think it's really helpful to recognize this as a spectrum, and different people think on different ends of that divergent versus convergent thinking spectrum in different strengths, right? And so being able to bring others into that conversation and that brainstorming space that might be able to like give you the nudge to not worry about the constraints, I think is really helpful, because oftentimes if that's not something that comes natural to us, we just think, oh, it's really difficult for me to then think really expansively and visionary. We all have, a seed of that, but for some people it comes more naturally than others. And so being able to like team up with folks that kind of complement you on that spectrum, I think is useful.
So that leads right into early adopters, right? And
Mm.
attracting people. So, my question for you, and obviously people can read your book, but since we're here today, what do you think are, your top two or three ways that you have been able to attract people that fit the bill, so to speak, right? Depending on whatever the situation is or the project is or what your needs are, whether that's as a more creative, or divergent thinker, or a more, I'll call it tactical thinker that's more convergent.
Yeah. So one of the studies that I stumbled across in researching for the book that really jumped at me, and I think spoke a lot of truth to my experience over the last 10 years, trying to figure out how do you find those early adopters. And the study broke a group of people, a group of participants, into two camps. And one of the camps, they asked those individuals to go get people to fill out a survey by talking to people out in the street. And right, they had like a 10-question survey that they wanted people to be able to fill out. And they sent that group out into the streets to have those conversations and engage with people face to face. And then the other half of the group, they had the exact same poll, the same questions that they wanted people to fill out, but they asked people to do it digitally, to go online and connect with people, send surveys out via email, and to engage people in that capacity.
Hmm.
And before they sent people off, they asked folks, how likely is it, do you think, that people will say yes to your request to actually talk with you and engage with you? And roughly both groups had the same response. They both basically said 50%. 5 out of 10 people we expect to actually agree with us and fill out our survey that we requested them. And what they actually found when they actually did the study is that the folks that went and engaged with people face to face were 34 times more likely to get people to engage with them than the ones
Wow.
that did it digitally and via email and online.
Hmm.
And so it speaks to two things. One, we underestimate the importance of talking to people face to face around the ideas and the communities that we want to build in the world, right? And so both groups thought it was roughly 50%. And so we dramatically underestimate the impact that that has. And then the second piece that I think really speaks to it is for every 6 people that you talk to face, you would have to talk to more than 200 people in a virtual lens of some sense, right? So you have to talk to 6 people face to face to equate to more than 200 people online. And so when you're thinking about how do you really get early adopters and people to rally around it, I think it really speaks to the importance of like putting yourself out there and talking to people to have the conversation. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do that literally face to face, right? A couple inches apart from one another. You can do that, by calling somebody up on the phone, right? Having a Zoom call, right? So you can still do that in a virtual capacity. But I think we often hide behind the text of our computers, right? We send these emails
Hmm.
out or these messages and we check the box off. Well, okay, I've put my idea out there. But in reality, it's like we've kind of hidden behind the technology, and people are not going to engage around an idea when it feels kind of sterile in that capacity. They engage around an idea when they get to like talk to somebody and hear their story and let it come to life. And I think that's so critical for us as we think about how do you find early adopters is like start by talking to people, right? Invest in the relationships, and then you'll discover those people kind of emerge out of the woodwork.
Yeah, I love this because it supports my having coffee with friends habit. So
Totally, right?
it's every excuse that I need to schedule another coffee. Yeah, I think, technology at this point, there's such a barrage of noise, right? There's so much coming in on any given day. I have multiple email accounts. They're all jam-packed with junk,
Hmm.
and so it becomes almost a matter of mental survival to begin to ignore things. And so, the social media or the email or however, you're reaching out via text becomes ignorable. I think you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah, and I mean, how many of us have sat on a Zoom call in the last year and a half, 2 years, and we're just like passively consuming whatever is sent through the screen to us, right? Like we're
Yep.
totally checked out. We've all been able to empathize with that experience, I think.
Hmm.
And then when you reposition that and imagine yourself like when you were in person with someone and maybe you're at a conference and you're talking with someone over the buffet table, or you like hang out in the lobby together and you're having these really rich conversations. The difference is whether we're passively consuming something or actively contributing to a community, right? And I think as we position ourselves as like how do we do community design and how do we organize groups of people around us, the more you can put people in a position of actively contributing rather than passively consuming, the more likely you're going to find those early adopters around your idea.
Yeah, I love this idea too. I know you do a lot of retreats, and I, I had every intention of doing a lot of retreats over the last couple years, but really have not been able to for obvious reasons, with the pandemic. And so everything is virtual, and it does change the dynamic. It changes the depth to which someone experiences connection. And I'm so looking forward to in-person retreats again. Hopefully all returning in 2022. I'm believing. I'm speaking it out loud here.
There you go. Put it up. Well, so the question that often, like, I don't know if haunts me is the right phrase here, but keeps me up in the middle of night is when I look back on my life and I ask myself, what are the moments, the conversations that have had the most significant impact on who I am as an
Mhm.
individual, as a leader, as a community builder? And when I think of those conversations, the question that doesn't, keep me up at night is what did I talk about? The question is where was I when that conversation took place?
Mm.
And when I actually like unpack that and I think about, I can come up with 3, 4, 5 conversations that have had significant impact on me. The where of those conversations is always really spontaneous, really organic, unplanned for, right? It's like hanging out at a bonfire, it's going to get coffee with somebody, right? It's these really just kind of like human spaces. It's not a conference or a classroom or a board meeting, right? Like those are never the
Mhm.
spaces where you have powerful conversations. And yet we spend so much of our energy designing communities around that, right? We spend so much time designing 60-minute Zoom calls and stuff like this. But that's not actually where the really powerful moments in our life happen. And so when thinking about how do you build community, it's how do you create the conditions where those seemingly spontaneous and organic conversations happen on a more regular basis, that's the question. If nothing else keeps me up at night, that's the one that's often spinning in my head.
Yeah, so I teach a lot about community and connection. And I feel like and maybe I'm getting on a topic and going down a rabbit hole here that we don't need to go down, but um a lot of our society is organized around what I consider very masculine energy,
Mm.
and the achievement mindset, the cookie cutter educational system that churns out results. Right, it gets it done,
Hmm.
and um, one of the things I appreciate about curiosity and creativity and community connection is that it is what I consider a feminine energy. And it's not that they're male female, that's different, but simply the masculine being a container, the feminine being the flow, right? And that idea of a different way of approaching conversations and not prescribing things, but allowing things to unfold, whether that's at coffee or whether that's at a retreat or whether that's just you bump into somebody on the street and you allow for whatever it is that presents itself in terms of connection. It is one thing that, I spend a lot of time talking about the shift that I feel like is going
Mm.
on right now, where people are recognizing that they've been do, and, and have forgotten the being part and just enjoying being connected, being on the journey, being who we are. So I feel like all of this fits together, but that's my own personal experience and encounter of your framework, I guess.
Yeah, and I feel like um, right, when we're having those conversations at a very personal level of like who we are and what our identity looks like, and what role we want to play in the world, as that starts shifting to, okay, I want to now bring an idea into fruition. I want to like see something happen. It's
Mhm.
so easy to move into that more masculine headspace.
Yeah.
And one of the frames that I often use with the folks I work with is called preparation over planning. So as you start to like want to bring an idea to life, it's so easy to think that I just have to put together the plan, right? And I need to have the thorough checklist, and I need to make sure that this happens followed by this thing, right? And we get into planning headspace.
Mhm.
And oftentimes that prevents us from having these really rich kind of spontaneous organic conversations and relationships emerge because we're like so in do mindset. And so instead of being in planning thinking, by stepping into a space of preparation. So it's like when I step into a community that I'm helping to nurture or build, right? I come into that space prepared, right? I know where I want to help guide a group. I know the different personalities and dynamics that are going to be coming together. So I feel prepared as I step in, but then I completely eliminate any need to stick to a plan, stick to an agenda, to a timeline. And that is often such a freeing headspace, I think, for a lot of like the co-facilitators that I work with, to like encourage them is like throw the agenda out the window. If you're stepping into a moment where there's like really rich relationships building, is like forget the agenda, right? And step into just a space of preparation rather than planning. And that's been a helpful, I think, frame for me when trying to like move from that masculine to feminine energy back and forth, when we're trying to bring an idea to life.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. It's a scary thing, I think, to throw out the agenda if that's been your only way of operating for a really long time, or that's what you know, or maybe you don't know or haven't led before, right? And so having, this very necessary structure to be your scaffolding feels right. But that trusting of your intuition and, trusting that there's magic to be discovered.
Mm.
There's great, great vision to be uncovered and, relationships to evolve. There's so much possibility that we deny ourselves if we put everything in a box.
Totally. One of the I love frameworks and visuals and graphics, and so one of the frameworks that was introduced to me many years ago through a community called the Art of Hosting, which is this really rich community of practice of facilitators and change agents around the world. But the framework is called the chaotic path. And it talks about the world on the spectrum of chaos versus order, right? So on one hand, right, we've got structure and comfort and, like processes that make sense and make order of the world. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got chaos where, lots of creativity and change is taking place, new and novel ideas. And oftentimes, we pull too far to either end of those spectrums, right? So if we go too far into the order side of things, we find ourselves into a space of like control. And this is where like micromanagement and rigidity like emerges, right? It's so that's the space where it's like there's no possibility for newness to kind of emerge out of the framework. But then on the opposite end, right, if we go too far into chaos, we start like falling into a space of collapse. And this is where like things are just like, in an unhelpful way, like destruction and breakdown, like things are just falling apart. It's not a space of where like actual newness is, being birthed. And so the chaotic path is all about how do you find and how do you dance in the center of that spectrum, right? The chaotic path is the combination of chaos and order, right? So it's like you're walking this very fine line where you need to kind of bring this like emergent perspective of like bring a little bit of chaos into the mix and a little bit of order. But so often we live in this like status quo headspace, which is more on like, in between order and control. And so I think giving people permission to like step away from that and recognize that, again, we all live on different points of that spectrum, right? I live in the chaos part of it. And so I always have to bring friends along that help, bring the order perspective in. But that chaotic path is such I think, a rich metaphor for like finding a place where we can kind of let the agenda slip away for a little bit and actually embrace something new that's emerging.
Yeah, you and I are totally on the same wavelength today because that was like the next thing on my list to talk about because I absolutely love that that there's a name for this. Thank you for that because I am probably going to fold this right into the things that I share with people. This is like a funny little tidbit, but my stage name, Lady Gray, has a lot of different meanings and origins and all of that. But the key one is that I lived a very, very black and white life up until about 5 or 6 years ago. And coming to a place in my own life where I was willing to live in the gray area of in between and to look for balance and to explore mystery and questions and to balance the chaos and the order, right? But one of the things that's come to mind kind of as you were talking about that is this also seems like a really valuable concept for healing, I'll call it, our communities right now, because I feel like we get stuck in absolutes. And that has been the cause of a lot of rage and rigidity on both sides of the spectrum. And this ability to flow and this ability to seek order, they're both valuable. But that in between place, that place of conversation and compromise and, coming to agreement and finding a healthy place of balance seems like it's, conceptually the same thing that we need to keep in mind when it comes to healing some of the rifts that have happened in our communities.
Yeah. And I often think about like this chaotic path spectrum as kind of a rubber band that gets like pulled and stretched back and forth between them. And, I think a lot of us, because of the pandemic, have been stretched into a space of chaos and perhaps collapse, right, in a lot of our communities. And as a result, we want to like, rubber band back the other direction. And so we rubber band back into a space of like control and order because it gives us comfort and like meaning and we can make sense of what's happening. But I think, we end up, living in this like overly stretched rubber band dynamic then where it's like there's constant chaos and collapse happening on one side. And then we're really fighting to have control in our lives. And so it's way harder to find that like chaotic path where chaotic path should feel really like it should flow, right? It should feel really natural. It should feel like a dance, right? That you're just kind of like easing back and forth in between these two spaces. But we're living in a time and where things are really polarized, and because of the dynamics that are happening around us. And so I think it requires even more of us to step into that like space of the chaotic path, where we're not feeling stretched to either side.
So you know what that is. That is the sound of our brain break. This week, I asked our guests to play a little game of this or that. All right, so this is rapid fire, okay? So whatever comes to mind first. All right, here we go. Billie Eilish or Taylor Swift?
Taylor Swift.
Madonna or Gaga?
Gaga.
Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings?
Harry Potter.
London or Paris?
London.
Netflix or Hulu?
Netflix.
Chips or popcorn?
Ooh, chips.
Jimmy Fallon or James Corden?
Jimmy Fallon.
Bath or shower?
Shower.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Okay, sandals with or without socks?
Oh, without. And sandals year round in that case.
While we're on shoes, Chucks or Vans?
Ooh, Chucks.
Facebook or Instagram?
Facebook, actually.
Meryl Streep or Bette Midler?
Oh my. Meryl Streep.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Beatles or Elvis?
Beatles.
Art of seduction or art of war?
Ooh, art of seduction.
Mountains or beaches?
Mountains. Easy.
Tacos or burritos?
Ooh, tacos.
All right.
Yeah, we'll let the listeners decide how that, chalks up my personality based on what I just
that means about you, right? Exactly. Imagine breathing in the romance of the City of Lights with a small group of fellow goddesses on this same journey of feminine exploration and embracing who you are as outrageous women. Join me in the City of Light for Lady Grey's Outrageous Paris Retreat. For more information, please visit paris.liveoutrageously.com. So now let's get back to my conversation with Spud about designing creative communities. And don't forget to stick around until the end for my 4 tips on how to train your brain to be more creative. Yeah, I love that. And as leaders, recognizing where you typically sit, like you said, I think both of us probably are on more of the chaotic end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
But recognizing as a leader that there's value in all of it, and there's a time and a place for certain pieces, and that if we don't allow ourselves to flow, we cut off possibility and conversation again.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I love running in-person retreats, right? That's my flow state, and without even having to introduce too much like content or structure into a group, simply having people stand on a spectrum is like, get out of your chair and go stand on the spectrum of chaos versus order. Like, where do you fall? Has been such a freeing, I think, experience for people to be like, oh, the other half of my team is standing way over there. Maybe that's why, right?
Yeah.
Like, we've got this tension, and right, like, you don't even have to unpack it further. Like, people know how to unpack it themselves. It's like, oh, this is where we stand. And being able to really like honor and respect the value that folks from the other side of the spectrum are bringing into the equation. I think that's been a personal learning, I think, for me over the years. Is like early on when I was like in this really kind of like rebellious, young, creative energy, it was like, everyone should live in chaos, right? Like, this is where new and creativity emerges. Is like, why are you not hanging out with me in my bubble? And then over years, learning how to really dance and work with folks that exist all across that spectrum, I think has been a really rich, I think, growing opportunity for me as somebody who tends to just live in chaos.
Yeah, not everybody can roller skate around and put up cardboard visualizations.
Yeah, and yet that feels like my norm. So that, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like this conversation kind of is leading right into this whole sustaining things with different kinds of partners. And I know you get into this in particular, 4 different kinds of people and everything. I'd love to hear you kind of explain that a little bit more to people.
I think oftentimes when I'm working with folks and they're trying to think about an idea that they want to get off the ground, the first thing that often comes to mind for folks, and this is because they live in a space of probably order and control and bureaucracy and organizational thought, is they feel like, okay, I've got to get the right partners on board, right? Like that's the first step so many people jump to is like, who are the partners that I need to get around me? And my work has shown me that that often comes at the end of a process rather than at the beginning. You know, people form organizations and partnerships, and right, it's a very relational thing. So I always feel like as a community builder, how do you invest in those individual relationships up front, and eventually those relationships will kind of emerge and turn into partnerships of some sort.
Mhm.
And so in the book, I talk about kind of 4 different types of partnerships, based on a spectrum of trust and alignment. And so one of the spectrums is partners can be working with you, and some of them have very low trust, right? So relationally, there's not a lot of trust built, or you could have a lot of high trust built with that individual. And then the other spectrum is the alignment, right? So when you're trying to work with a partner, sometimes you're working with partners and you don't actually have like a crystally clear, aligned vision of what you want to create, but they still want to work with you and support you. It's not a bad thing, right? So sometimes you have low alignment and sometimes you have really high alignment. And based on where you fall within that kind of XY grid, there tends to be 4 different types of partnerships that I've seen emerge. And so when you're working with a group that has very low trust built up with you and very low alignment around the impact that you want to create in the world, those tend to be very transactional partnerships, right? It's like, and I've had many of these, right? If I go to a grocery chain and say, hey, I don't know who you are, I just popped in off the parking lot, but I'm building this project. It's going to create some value in the community. Would you consider sponsoring, right, $100 worth of food for our event? Right, that's a very transactional type of partnership. It's not
Mhm.
necessarily a bad one, but we have very little trust built. And that grocery chain probably doesn't care too much about the vision that I'm
Right.
putting up there, right? We're not like overly
Right.
aligned. So that's a transactional partnership. It's not to say it's bad, but you probably don't want to be building lots of transactional based partnerships in your work. Um, then so that's the like bottom left hand quadrant, right? So low
Okay.
alignment, low trust. Then if you move over into the bottom right hand side of the quadrant, that's where you have temporary partnerships, right? And so temporary partnerships, you still have low alignment, right? So you're not like super aligned on what you want to create, but for whatever reason, you might have a lot of trust built up with that partner. So I think of in some of my own work, I have some banks, and I really have great relationships with those bankers and executives at the bank. They don't have a ton of alignment with me on some of the work that I'm doing, but we've got great trust built up. And so it's sort of a temporary type of partnership. Like they're going to keep supporting me, maybe not really long term. It's sort of in a temporary capacity because we don't have that alignment built. But I can kind of nurture the trust that we've had built up. So those tend to be like temporary types of relationships. Then if you zoom over to the top left hand side of the quadrant, that's where you have low trust but really high alignment, and this tends to be timid relationships, so timid partnerships. And I've had so many folks in this space, right, where it's, if I'm a young emergent leader, right, and I'm like just stepping into my practice or my craft, I don't have a lot of trust built up right across my community, right? The social capital isn't quite there,
Mhm.
but I may put out an idea or a vision that really aligns with someone, right? It might align with our community foundation. It could align with like our local municipal government, but they've got no trust to back this up. So those partners are really timid to want to step into a relationship with Spud, right? And so those relationships really require a lot of time. They require other people kind of going out on your behalf who do have that trust to be able to kind of speak on your behalf. Like think of like a reference check on a resume, right? So if you're applying for a job that you don't know anyone there, right? They don't have much trust in who you are necessarily, but these reference checks can kind of like speak to that for you. So there's lots of timid partnerships that I feel like you can then grow into the fourth quadrant. And the fourth quadrant are really transformational partnerships. And this is where you've built lots of trust and lots of alignment. And those are the type of partnerships that you really want to invest in. And they come really naturally once you've invested the time and helped people see kind of the commonalities when it comes to the vision that you want to create. So yeah, so that's how I think about partnerships, is like transactional partnerships, temporary partnerships, timid partnerships, and then transformational partnerships. And how do you kind of walk that spectrum to get people to a high alignment and high trust point?
So much good stuff there. Oh my goodness. It's definitely worth digging into this book. If you guys haven't gotten it already, it's called Designing Creative Communities. Your town is your canvas. Learn how to make your mark. So I am going to ask you a couple of outrageous questions, Spud.
Ooh, bring them on.
Because I always like to ask my guests these questions. So you have a lovely ability to dream. And as we've just discussed, so do you have any big passion projects or ideas or dreams that are things that you're hoping to put into action?
Mm. So I'm a big believer in put your intention out in the world, like
Mm-hmm.
speak it in front of people,
Yep.
plaster it on your Facebook wall, whatever it needs to be.
Say it on a
And then
podcast.
say it on a podcast, exactly. And then let your community respond and rally around you, right?
Yep.
So 2 years ago, and I think the reason in your very early part, when you asked me Facebook versus Instagram, the reason I like Facebook is because they show me my memories. And
Mm-hmm.
so just a couple days ago, right, I opened up Facebook, they show me my memories. And 2 years ago, I put my intention out into the world to want to write a book. And I didn't know the book was going to be the thing that I created, but I basically spoke the intention out to my community and said, hey, I'm hearing from folks that you want help in being able to design creative communities. This is before the Canvas framework existed or any of that.
Yeah.
And I just put the intention out there and said, what do people want to see from me, right? Do you want me to write a book? Do you want me to build a field guide? Do you want to create a facilitator guide? Like,
Mm-hmm.
should I create an online course? And I just put the call out there, and the community rallied around me, right? And they're like, we would love to see a book, right? And we'd love to see these different pieces. And so fast forward 2 years, that memory pops up, and I was able to look back and see, of the list of 7 or 8 things that I put out there, right? Three of them I had created like an in-person retreat around creative communities. I'd
Mm-hmm.
launched a field guide and then created the book. So one of the pieces that I had not accomplished that was on that list, which is one of the things that I'm currently holding that I really want to see brought to fruition, was this idea of buying either a single RV or a fleet of RVs
Mm-hmm.
and create them as these like mobile creative community kind of headquarters, innovation labs and studios. And the reason that I think this is an idea that really resonates with me, and this feels like this big unreasonable ask, is as I travel around to lots of towns and communities, oftentimes the thing that is missing is simply the permission to create.
Mm-hmm.
I talk to so many leaders and so many community members, and when you actually boil down to like the bottom of it, they have the ideas for what they want their community to look like. They've got the resources, they've got the social capital, they've got the people, but they don't have the permission to actually pursue it, which was a really freeing realization when I discovered that. Is like when I step into a community, all I'm doing is I'm serving as like a human permission slip to let
Mm-hmm.
people pursue that idea. And that I recognized I can only do that so many times a year, stepping into somebody's community and helping them. And so if I had a fleet of RVs where I could recruit a bunch of people to jump on the RV and travel around to different communities and simply like hang out for a month in a town and give that community the permission to pursue a vision that they've got for themselves, that's the big dream that I'd love to see happen in the next 2 years. So we'll see. I have no idea where I'm going to find the money or RVs or anything like that. That's all to be determined. But that's the big outrageous vision that I'm holding at the moment.
I love it. I love it. And, I'm a law of attraction and manifestation gal. So, hey,
I
let's
hear it.
put it out there. Um, awesome. This is the time in the program where I ask for Spud's outrageous advice. So
mm.
one thing do you think that listeners to this podcast should, try in order to make life more outrageous? Or what's something that, you have done that others might try?
So I'll just give you the tagline and then I'll unpack it here.
Okay.
Um, Rather than follow your passion, follow your curiosity.
Mm.
And that insight has awakened so many new ideas and possibilities for me in my own life, right? I can't think of a phrase, follow your passion, that is more plastered on social media timelines and probably inspirational posters that people have hanging in their office or in their home,
Mhm.
right? Like we hear people and coaches tell that of us all the time. It's like, go follow your passion, follow your passion. And that phrase is so overwhelming. There's a lot of pressure and expectation that gets laid on our shoulders when we're told, go follow your passion, because for most of us, we don't really know what we're passionate about, right? If you asked me what I'm passionate about 5 years ago versus 10 years ago, like I wouldn't quite know and I'd be trying to figure it out and I wouldn't feel totally confident sharing with folks. And so when you substitute the word passion with curiosity, everything feels so much more freeing, right? So rather than following your passion, step into a space of genuine curiosity. Because at any point, I can guarantee somebody is curious about something, right? And when you follow those curiosities, they often emerge into something that we're ultimately passionate about. But we're not starting from a place of like weighty expectation of like, oh, if I follow my passion and then it doesn't like work out, like what does that say of me, right? Like I failed, right? And so that's sort of like the perspective that we bring into this work. And I think that's so unhelpful as you're
Mhm.
trying to like pursue that path for yourself. So that's the biggest piece of crazy, outrageous advice is just stop following your passion, follow your curiosity instead.
Well, that's food for thought, man. As a coach, for sure. Because I do spend time talking to people about passion and purpose and this deep need for meaningfulness. And, it's a topic. It is definitely something that weighs on people.
Mm, yeah. And I just feel like, and I've stepped into those spaces is where like, I feel like I'm not, right. I'm not producing, I'm not like pursuing the thing that I was ultimately designed to do, right? Like it just, you end up getting so sucked up into that headspace, right? This imposter syndrome of like, I don't know if I'm actually the one that is like, singularly passionate about this thing. And that's exhausting, right? It's really taxing. And so, yeah, curiosity is like for example, last weekend, I climbed on top of a parking deck and I bought a snow machine and I just started, spraying snow down on people in, early November. Um, and it was just because I was curious. I'd always wanted to own a snow machine and I was curious what would happen if I did it. And it brought me such joy. And I'm not quite sure if I'm passionate about snow machines yet, but I am definitely curious and I'm going to keep pursuing it and see what it does for my community. So, yeah, I think stepping into that headspace it just releases all of that burden that we, unintentionally put on our shoulders that we don't need.
Yeah, snow machine operator on LinkedIn is maybe, a
I'm going to go
confusing
Google
little
that.
bullet point. Oh, hilarious. I always love to know more about your outrageous fans and supporters. Do you want to give anybody a shout out in particular?
Mm, I'm going to give a shout out just because timely. So one of my mentors and collaborators actually just sadly passed away from
I'm
cancer this
sorry.
past week. And yeah, his name was Will Wise, and he truly was one of the wiser individuals that I've ever encountered. And we've just had some amazing walks together. And so he and his business partner, Chad Littlefield, run a company called and it's all about helping people build really authentic connection. And so I just want to shout out Will and the work that he helped usher into the world because yeah, it's been neat to see the impact that he's created in so many people's lives to build more authentic connection, and it's informed the work I do. It's referenced a little bit in the book at different points. So just yeah, with all that has been going on this past week, I'd love to shout that out.
Thank you for that. And I love the butterfly effect that I'm sure he has had through you and the work that you're doing. So, memory eternal, as we say.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So before we wrap up, is there a way that listeners and new fans can connect with you?
Yeah, I am easily findable online. I'm one of the only Spuds out there, so that makes it simple. Having a really easy, stage name.
There you go.
Exactly. So, but yeah, mycreative.community is the website. And that's where people can go to find out about the book. The audiobook just released here recently. And then if they want to follow up with me as well, you can get in touch with all of my social media accounts directly through that website. So www.mycreative.community.
Lovely. Well, Spud, it has been wonderful. And I feel like there are a lot more conversations to have.
Absolutely. I am always around to dive into these talks. So you just let me know when.
Beautiful. Well, you're always welcome back on the show. Thank you for teaching us to live a little more outrageously. Each week, I like to leave you with some tips, some practical things that you can apply to make your life more outrageous. You might be surprised to hear that you can actually train your brain to be more creative. A lot of times people think that creativity is some mystical, innate skill, and you either have it or you don't. But research shows us that there are some strategies you can use to stimulate creativity in your everyday life and benefit from new ways of thinking and problem solving. So the first suggestion I have for you is to switch up your regular routine, because it's super easy to get stuck in a rut of doing things the same way every day. But the more you stimulate your brain with change and novelty, the more flexible and creative your brain is going to get. Keep your mind on its toes by reading new books or trying different foods or places to eat, or even just trying a different route as you drive through your neighborhood. Switch up your usual routine, and that will stimulate your mind and get you thinking about new possibilities and approaches to life. Another suggestion is to relax the rules. Everybody knows that I love breaking the rules, and so much of what you do is often bounded by these shoulds and ought tos, right? And whether it's the 8 glasses of water you're supposed to drink, or the right foods to eat, or how much and when, or whether it's okay to talk in an elevator, or whatever it is, much of your life is really restricted by how you think you should behave. So break some of the rules. Smile and say hi to the waiter or a bus driver, or crack a joke in the elevator. Open up a little bit and allow your creative brain to flourish. Another good way of relaxing your mind and allowing your creativity to grow is to simply sit in the present and observe what's going on around you. Work your way through each of your senses and really notice your environment. What can you hear and see and smell and feel and even taste? Notice everything, and you can even write down what comes into your head or create some art. When you walk down the street, look up and around. Chances are you'll be the only person not looking at their phone. Don't miss out on noticing the signs of winter. Look up and around and see how many colors and textures are right there in front of you. And lastly, really talk to people. How much of your conversation is either you talking or being talked at? Just step back a little and really engage with other people. Don't just talk or think of what you're going to say next. Practice listening actively and give the other person space to speak. Real conversations can open up all sorts of possibilities and creative solutions you might never have thought of. Connection and community is one of the key principles to living an outrageous life. And not only is it important because of our relationships, it also fosters greater creativity and allows you to have deeper, more transformational relationships, which lead to great vision and evolution and leadership. That was awesome today. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Let's make a difference. Let's change the world. Let's live more outrageously. Please get in touch with me. Email me. Visit www.liveoutrageously.com. If you liked what you heard here today, I'd love for you to leave me a review and let me know what you want me to talk about. And while you're there, subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Go be outrageous, you lovely humans.